High blood pressure doesn't hurt until it's already done damage. And for 70% of adults over 60, that damage may already be underway. Welcome back to the Senior Health Podcast, the place where wisdom meets science to help you thrive well into your later years. Today, we're joined by Japan's oldest doctor, whose life is living proof of what's possible after 100. He's not just Japan's most respected doctor. He's a daily walker, an active healer, and a believer in the healing power of simple habits. Dr. Shigeaki Hinohara, it's a privilege to learn from you once again.
Thank you, John. It's always a gift to sit down with you. And this is not just an important topic, it is a quiet emergency, especially for older adults who think feeling fine means being healthy. High blood pressure doesn't care how you feel until it does. And by the time it makes itself known, it's often already stolen something precious, your energy, your memory, your time. In this episode, we'll unpack exactly what blood pressure is, how it changes with age, and what signs are too often ignored. We'll dive into the foods that heal, the habits that harm, and the small movements that restore balance. We'll also explore how stress and sleep, two invisible forces, can quietly raise or lower your risk without a single symptom. And most importantly, we'll offer clear, realistic steps that you can begin today without fear, shame, or overwhelm. Stay with us until the end, because even one insight, one shift in your routine could be the difference between decline and vitality.
Doctor, what you said just brought back the story of a patient I'll never forget. He was 82, sharp, active, walked every morning, ate oatmeal like it was a religion. At his checkup, we found his blood pressure was sky high. He laughed, said he felt fine, just a little tired. 3 weeks later, he had a minor stroke. He made it through, but that moment changed everything. Because that's the danger, isn't it? High blood pressure doesn't scream. It whispers until it takes something you can't get back.
Exactly, it speaks in silence. And too many people only begin to listen once something has already been taken from them.
Before we dive in, take a moment to share where you're listening from and what's one food people in your region eat all the time. We've had listeners from the UK, the US, Canada, Papua New Guinea, the Netherlands, India, the Philippines, Nigeria, Ghana, Ireland, Australia, and many more. Hearing your answers helps us recommend heart-healthy habits that truly fit your culture and lifestyle.
I've always admired the deep use of spices in Indian cooking: turmeric, cumin, ginger. So many of these traditional ingredients are not just flavorful, but healing. It's a beautiful reminder that medicine often begins in the kitchen.
I can't agree more with you. Now let's start with something simple, doctor, but so important. What is blood pressure really? And why does it matter even more as we get older?
Blood pressure is the force your blood uses to move through your body. It's not good or bad, it's essential. But just like water through a garden hose, too much pressure over time begins to wear down the very system it's meant to nourish. The problem is, most people think of high blood pressure as an illness, when in truth, it's often a signal, a reflection of something deeper in your lifestyle.
That's such a subtle but powerful shift in perspective. You're saying blood pressure isn't the root problem but the result of other imbalances?
Exactly. And when you're older, those imbalances don't need to be dramatic to cause trouble. A little too much salt, a little too little movement, a little less resilience to stress than before.
So it's more like a long-term accumulation. Years of habits that seemed harmless at the time finally tipping the scale.
Yes, and the body tries to adapt for as long as it can. But with age, that margin for error narrows. The arteries stiffen, the kidneys work harder, the nervous system becomes more reactive, and suddenly that quiet pressure becomes dangerous.
You're reminding me of something I see often. Patients who say, "I've eaten this way my whole life. Why is it a problem now?" And the truth is, the same behavior at 40 doesn't always land the same at 70. So if blood pressure is a reflection, let's dig deeper into what it's reflecting, especially when it comes to what we eat. What's really happening between food and pressure?
When we eat, we are not only feeding our bodies, we are instructing them. Every ingredient carries a message, and over time, those messages shape how our blood vessels behave. Some foods make them softer, more relaxed. Others tighten and inflame them without us even noticing.
So it's not just about calories or weight, it's biochemical, even hormonal. And that impact can be immediate, not just long-term.
Yes, very much so. One salty restaurant meal can raise blood pressure for hours. But the real concern comes from the daily exposures, processed snacks, hidden sodium, fast meals eaten on autopilot.
It's interesting you mention hidden sodium. I had a patient once who swore she never used the salt shaker, but her frozen meals each day had her well over the limit without her realizing it.
That's extremely common. In Japan, we've had to confront this too. Soy sauce, pickled foods, miso. These are traditional, but when eaten in excess and without balance, they can silently push pressure up.
And yet we also know many traditional diets, like the Okinawan one, are associated with lower blood pressure and longer life. So the message isn't cut everything out, but to understand what supports the body and what overwhelms it. Which brings me to something our listeners always ask. Is it just about avoiding the bad, or are there specific foods that actively help bring blood pressure down?
There are absolutely foods that support healthy blood pressure, and their power is often underestimated. Potassium-rich foods, for example, bananas, sweet potatoes, beans, they help the kidneys flush out excess sodium. That balance between sodium and potassium is more important than most people realize. In fact, in some studies, increasing potassium had an even greater impact than simply cutting salt.
That's fascinating. So we're not just talking about restriction, we're talking about nourishment, about actively giving the body what it needs to regulate itself better.
Exactly, and this is especially important for older adults because as we age, our sensitivity to these mineral imbalances increases. What worked at 30 may no longer serve you at 70. The body changes, and the diet must adapt too.
Which foods would you say are underestimated in that way? Foods that people might overlook, but that offer real benefit.
Leafy greens like spinach and beet greens are very effective, and so are lentils and yogurt with no added sugar. These foods not only support blood pressure, they also help reduce inflammation and support gut health, which we're learning plays a role in cardiovascular balance too.
That's something we're seeing more of in Western research as well, the gut-heart connection. It's incredible how interconnected these systems are.
Yes, John, and a recent Japanese study published in the Journal of Hypertension Research found that older adults who consumed higher amounts of potassium-rich vegetables, especially leafy greens, had significantly lower systolic blood pressure, even after adjusting for sodium intake. But of course, if someone has kidney disease or takes medications that retain potassium, they need to be more cautious.
I think that nuance is so important because we hear eat more potassium and assume more is always better, but that's not true for everyone. This is where guidance matters and context matters. And while food is foundational, it's not the only part of the story. I want to shift gears now and talk about movement because that's where a lot of people, especially seniors, get stuck. They want to exercise, but they're not sure what kind is safe or effective.
Movement is one of the most powerful tools we have, and yet it's often misunderstood. Many seniors assume they need to jog or lift weights to improve their blood pressure, but that's not the case. Even low-impact activities like slow walking, tai chi, or wall squats can be incredibly effective. The key is consistency and choosing something that feels sustainable, not overwhelming.
That's encouraging, because a lot of patients feel defeated before they even begin. They think if they can't do 30 minutes of cardio, it's not worth trying at all.
But even 5-minute sessions repeated throughout the day can begin to shift the body's response. Studies now show that isometric movements, things like holding a plank or a wall sit, can lower systolic pressure significantly, sometimes more than traditional cardio. The body responds to small, repeated signals of strength and control.
I imagine it also helps psychologically, to feel strong again, to feel capable in your body.
Yes, and that emotional shift is vital. When a person starts to feel that their body can still do things, they treat it with more care. That mental engagement becomes part of the therapy.
That makes so much sense. I've seen that spark return in patients who start simple walking routines or even stretch regularly. They carry themselves differently with more confidence. It's like they stop being afraid of their own bodies. But sometimes, even when people eat well and move more, their blood pressure doesn't respond the way they hoped. And that's when we need to talk about something less visible, but just as powerful: the way we sleep and the way we handle stress.
You're absolutely right. Some of the biggest contributors to high blood pressure don't come from what we eat or how we move, but from what we carry inside. Poor sleep, especially sleep that is short or constantly interrupted, puts the body in a constant state of alert. That tension elevates cortisol, the stress hormone, which raises blood pressure even while we rest. And over time, the body forgets how to relax. Its default becomes survival mode.
That chronic state of alert, you can almost see it in people. The tight jaw, the shallow breathing, the restless nights. It's like their nervous system never gets a break.
Exactly. And sleep apnea is one of the most underdiagnosed causes of resistant hypertension. People think snoring is just annoying, but it's often a sign that their body is choking for air during the night. This not only raises blood pressure, it damages the brain, the heart, the vessels.
It's frightening how often sleep gets overlooked in a health plan. Most people don't even mention it at checkups unless you ask them directly.
And yet improving sleep can sometimes lower blood pressure as much as a medication. Teaching the body how to rest, how to breathe deeply, how to let go. This is ancient wisdom, and it's also modern medicine. And when we pair that with healthier stress responses, we create space for healing.
That hits home. I've had patients who did everything right on paper: perfect diet, exercise, but their lives were full of emotional pressure, unspoken anxiety, caregiving stress. Until we addressed that, their blood pressure stayed high. So let's talk about the final layer here: the numbers themselves. What should we actually be aiming for? And how low is too low, especially in older adults?
Blood pressure targets aren't one-size-fits-all, especially in older adults. For many years, doctors aimed for anything under 140/90, but newer research, like the SPRINT trial, suggests that getting closer to 120/80 can significantly reduce heart attacks and strokes. However, what the studies don't always capture is how an individual feels at those lower numbers. If you lower blood pressure too aggressively, especially with a medication, some patients feel dizzy, foggy, or weak.
And that's where the conversation gets more personal. Because numbers matter, yes, but they're only useful if they match the person's experience of daily life.
Exactly. If someone is fainting or unsteady, that's not success, it's risk. The best number is one that reduces danger without reducing quality of life. And for many seniors, That sweet spot is slightly higher than what the textbooks say.
So we're not just managing numbers, we're managing trade-offs, context, and comfort.
Yes, and that's where the art of medicine meets the science. A good doctor listens to the numbers, but also to the patient's story. Sometimes the goal is 130. Sometimes it's stability.
It really is a balancing act. I've had patients ask me if they should aim for the lowest number possible, and I always say, not if it costs you your strength or your confidence. Blood pressure is a guide, not a race. And once we understand what affects it and why it matters, then the final piece is this. What do we actually do next? What's one thing someone listening today can start with without feeling overwhelmed or afraid?
Start with something so small it feels almost silly. A 5-minute walk after breakfast. A pinch less salt in the soup. Turning off the television 10 minutes earlier than usual. These tiny changes don't feel heroic, but they compound, and the body notices.
That's such a reassuring way to think about it. We don't need to flip our whole lives upside down. We just need to begin.
Yes, and the beginning builds momentum. One small success makes the next feel more possible. You don't need perfection, you need movement in the right direction.
So often people wait for the perfect plan before they act, and in the meantime, years go by.
Exactly, and the truth is, the perfect plan doesn't exist. What exists is today. What exists is the one choice you can make before this day ends. And then again tomorrow.
I love that. And it's something every listener can take to heart, literally. Whether it's swapping canned soup for fresh, calling a friend for a walk, or asking your doctor about your sleep. The goal isn't to do everything. It's to do something. And speaking of momentum, before we close, I want to ask you one final question. Not about the body, but about the mind. After more than 100 years on this earth, what do you believe is the most overlooked source of health in our later years?
I believe it's connection, and that's the source so many overlook. Not just with others, but with yourself, with your purpose, with the rhythm of your own body.
I couldn't agree more. And when I think of my healthiest patients, it's never just about what they eat or how they move. It's about how connected they are to something that matters. Dr. Hinohara, before we go, I'd love to ask you for one final thought, a single line our listeners can carry with them today.
Live lightly and love deeply. Your blood pressure will thank you for both. That's the medicine we forget to prescribe.
That's beautifully said. And that's our invitation to you as a listener. Begin with care, stay curious, and trust that small steps can create big change. If this episode moved you, share it with someone you love. We always enjoy hearing where you're joining us from. Your voices and stories are what make this podcast feel like a real conversation, not just information. It's amazing to see how this community continues to grow across borders and age groups. And if your heart health journey is just beginning, be sure to check out our next episode. We've saved you a seat.